my queen, my queen. Oh, she, beautiful, wonderfully made. She's heaven's angel, so strong, even in struggle, yeah. When life comes like a storm from every angle, she rises above it all, the backbone of every home. Nothing compares to all she do. The true meaning of every family. She's the glue. Yeah. Where would we be without you? You brought us Martin, Malcolm, and Obama. Yeah, and Jesus too. Oh, she's sophisticated, strong, simply amazing, humble, honest, and helpful, educated, ebony, eccentric, empowering. She's a queen, she's a queen. You better treat her like a queen. Oh, Her strength is amazing. Life inside, 9 months she's carrying back to work, 'cause the family she's carrying. Society don't give her just due, but she prevails and stands tall. A champion, a true woman. But nothing compares to all she do. Yeah, the true meaning of every family. She's the glue. Yeah, oh. And where would we be without you? Yeah, you brought us Martin, Malcolm, and Obama, and Jesus too. Oh, she is sophisticated, strong, yeah, simply amazing, humble, honest, and helpful. Not only that you are educated, yes you are, eccentric, empowering. You're mine, she's a queen. You're mine, you're my. Treat her like a queen. No price could be put on how much she's worth. So valuable, she's the soul of the earth. Yeah. All a part of God's genius plan. Powerful as she can be, the man's ATLP. Yes, sophisticated, strong, simply amazing. She is humble, honest, and helpful. What I like about her is she's educated. She's my ebony, empowering.
Hello and welcome to Let's Talk with Bishop R.C. Blakes. R.C. is an author, empowerment teacher, and the proud pastor of the New Home Ministries of New Orleans, Louisiana, and Houston, Texas. His message circles the globe. His conversational and candid approach to challenging content makes him a relevant voice to all generations. Get ready for a life-changing transformational conversation.
Hello. This is R.C. Blakes, and I'm back again, and I'm so excited. Please invite someone to come in and to be a part of our conversation today. I'm going back into my latest book entitled Me, My, Mine. And today we are in chapter number 5. and we're talking just for a few minutes about the impact of narcissistic abuse. This is something that became real to me some years ago. As I've said a million times before, I had written a book, The Father-Daughter Talk, and I described in the book a character or characters that men play. And women literally from around the world started reaching out to me saying, "You are describing a narcissist. You are describing narcissistic abuse." And I had never really thought about narcissism beyond, just the typical idea of a narcissist being a person that's egocentric, self-consumed or whatever. I'd never thought about all of the other dimensions and the realities that play into what makes a narcissist and what impact a narcissist has on the life of an individual. So in chapter number 5 here, we're talking about the impact of narcissistic abuse. And I'll be looking down because I'm basically just kind of reading from the book itself and just kind of making some high points. And hopefully you'll hear enough to want to read the whole book for yourself. But I talk in the book about how I was blindsided by the reality of narcissistic abuse. I'd always, again, viewed narcissism as simply, an inconvenience of having to share space with an obnoxious, egotistical, self-promoting jerk of a type person. And I did not realize what I was in for when the full scope of this issue was actually unpacked or revealed to me. As I really began to unpack it and look at it, and Holy Spirit began to really enlighten me, and mental health professionals, many of whom are my friends, I have many, should I say, that are friends of mine, began to really unpack this issue for me. It really took me aback, honestly, when I thought about how intentional, how calculated, how committed narcissists are to hurting their victims, in one way or the other. It just really took me aback. But I started to understand that a narcissist, or the impact of a narcissist on a victim's life, is not some surface level annoyance, as I thought initially. This is more than a person that's just bragging all of the time, selfish, just kind of an annoyance. It's kind of like a fly. We think about the way I used to think about the impact of a narcissist. It was kind of like a fly buzzing about the ear. But the reality is that the impact of a narcissist is not as inconsequential as a fly buzzing about the ear. It's more like a poisonous snake sinking in its fangs and constantly pushing out toxins into one's artery, constantly pumping venom. When you think about the impact of a narcissist, it's more than an annoyance. It many times is a matter of life or death. Literally. Even presently, I'm dealing with a situation where a person is trying to disconnect from a narcissist. And it ain't nothing nice. You know what I mean? I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy, honestly. But the narcissist is hunting for the soul of his or her victim. When we think about the soul from a biblical perspective, the soul speaks of the mind, the will, the emotion. And what the narcissist is endeavoring to do is to manage, manipulate the mind, the will, the emotions of his or her victim. So as I have begun to understand the fringes of this issue, just the fringes, I am no expert. I will probably very, very rarely accept any invitations to talk about the issue because I'm not an expert. I'm not a mental health professional. I'm not a go-to person on this. When I wrote this book, from the perspective of demonstrating how I see narcissism all through the Bible. Because I have not heard much about narcissism in the church. And as I understood the issue, I began to realize that a lot of church leadership is narcissistic. And a lot of what ails people in terms of religion is due to narcissistic abuse by narcissistic leaders. So it does not surprise me that we do not hear a lot about this issue in the church. It's because it's as much an issue with our leaders many times as it is in our personal lives and in our love affairs. So I'm compelled to describe this as when I think about the impact of narcissistic abuse on its victim, I'm compelled to describe this as purely demonic, is what I write in the book. No one human being is capable of the actions and schemes to injure another person like narcissists are. The concepts of ghosting, gaslighting, hoovering are spiritual in nature, and there's nothing holy about it, meaning it's what? It's demonic. These thoughts do not emanate from a human soul alone, and certainly God does not author such confusion. This is the work of demons. There are signs that one is suffering from narcissistic abuse. Narcissistic abuse syndrome is simply the emotional and psychological impact the behavior of a narcissist has on the victim. I believe, I write, that narcissistic abuse may damage the brain. And this is based in some of the experts that I've read, listened to. For instance, Kim Saeed, author, researcher, and educator, in her blog titled Long-Term Narcissistic Abuse Can Cause Brain Damage, says repeated emotional trauma leads to both PTSD and CPTSD, which should be reason enough to leave an abusive partner. But what many people don't realize is that over time, these repeated emotional injuries shrink the hippocampus. That's a tongue twister. The hippocampus, hope I said it right, which is responsible for memory and learning, while enlarging the amygdala, which houses primitive emotions such as fear, grief, guilt, envy, and shame. So you see why people who struggle from narcissistic abuse tend to exhibit behaviors or emotions like fear, grief, guilt, envy, or shame. Now, there are certain predictable outcomes when a person engages a narcissist in a close relationship. In some circles, this is labeled as narcissistic victim syndrome. Now, the victim checks out on life and detaches from what once mattered. That's what I have discovered quite a lot as a pastor, is that victims of narcissistic abuse check out on life and they tend to forget about what once mattered. One of the primary signs of a person who may be under the stress of narcissistic abuse is when they begin to disconnect from the life they created. Have you ever met anybody like that? There are many of you, I'm sure, that can testify that you have probably people in your lives right now who are, connected to narcissists and have checked out on everything that matters, from career to money management to hygiene, to what I call mandatory relationships, or relationships with people that they really need in their lives. They just kind of tend to let that fall to the wayside. When you as an individual are dealing with narcissistic abuse syndrome, you feel emotionally or even physically detached from your world. You lose your sense of self and who you are. You forget what truly matters, and you find it difficult to even make decisions. Your brain, I believe, as I stated, is damaged, by staying under the pressure of narcissistic abuse syndrome. Now, the official term used to define this state is dissociation. And dissociation is a psychological experience in which people feel disconnected from their thought process, disconnected from their sense of self, or disconnected from their sense of personal values. Just disconnected. It's like, they've gone into perpetual pause mode. And the traumatized person is so confused about their existence that their mind checks out. And there are some that are watching this or will watch this who can testify they've been there or they are there presently. It's as if their mind has simply checked out. Now, the Bible describes a state of existence in 1 Timothy chapter 4, verses 1 and 2. It reads like this: "Now the Spirit speaketh expressly that in the latter times some shall depart from the faith, giving heed to seducing spirits and doctrines of devils, speaking lies and hypocrisy, having their conscience seared with a hot iron." Now, the Apostle Paul here, writing to his spiritual son Timothy, raises a very troubling issue when he says they give heed to seducing spirits. A seducing spirit is an imposter spirit that circumvents a person's defenses and lodges in the individual's mind to control their choices and feelings. Now, you'll also notice that the verse says the conscience will be seared with a hot iron. This speaks of separating the person from their sense of right versus wrong. This is the impact of allowing yourself to rest under the stress and the strain of narcissistic abuse. The next thing I write is that the victim will often live as a people pleaser. When you are the victim of narcissistic abuse, you will find yourself living as a people pleaser. The fear of creating a backlash makes the victim hypersensitive to the wishes of others. They do not want to do anything to set off an episode. They have been made so fearful of the abuser that they are living in a prison of anxiety. They would rather humiliate themselves than to reap the backlash of their victimizer. Now, Proverbs 29, verses 25 and 26 reads like this: the fear of man bringeth a snare, but whoso putteth his trust in the Lord shall be safe. Many seek the ruler's favor, but every man's judgment comes from the Lord. But notice how he says the fear of man brings a what? A snare, a trap. You're bound by this. Now, the extended fallout is when your people-pleasing habits for the victimizer begin to apply across the board to the entire world. You forget how to have an opinion or a position, and now you live your entire life seeking to please everyone you encounter. Because the victims of narcissistic abuse often find themselves as people pleasers. The next thing I write is that the victim begins to sacrifice all of their personal needs to accommodate the abuser. Do you know anyone like that? When a person is deep into narcissistic abuse, they will often deplete themselves of things necessary to please the abuser. I see it all of the time in church, because when you think about narcissistic abuse, that happens on every level of relationship, from children to parents, parents to children, friend to friend, church member to church member, church leader to parishioner, parishioner to church leader. And quite often when people are under the influence of narcissistic abuse, they sacrifice themselves for the wishes of the abuser rather. Because a narcissist will use you to any extent. A narcissist will use you to any extent. In Acts chapter 16, verses 16 through 19, there's a woman that's possessed by a demonic spirit, and she goes about, predicting the future, doing all kinds of spiritual stunts. And there are some men that are using this woman's demonic imprisonment and her supernatural abilities to make money off of her. And if you look in Acts 16 through 19, it says this: and it came to pass, as we went to prayer, a certain damsel possessed with the spirit of divination met us, which brought her masters much gain by soothsaying. She had masters. The same followed Paul and us and cried, saying, these men are the servants of the Most High God, which show unto us the way of salvation. And this did she many days. But Paul, being grieved, turned and said to the spirit, I command thee in the name of Jesus Christ to come out of her. And he came out the same hour. And when her masters, here it is, saw that the hope of their gains was gone, they cared nothing about her being bound. They caught Paul and Silas and drew them into the marketplace unto the rulers. But pay attention to the latter part. When they saw that hope of their gains were gone, they took action. They used this poor woman, and she lived to be used by them, because narcissists will use you to any extent. There are no limits on how far a narcissist will go in terms of using and abusing you. And victims, I write this next, victims find it extremely challenging to trust. Victims find it extremely challenging to trust. When the victim is in the midst of a relationship with the narcissist, this distrust is based on the abuser's manipulation and control over the victim's social life. Because the narcissist can make a victim distrust their own mother. So victims find it extremely challenging to trust. A narcissist can have so much control and so much manipulation that they can make you distrust your best friends, your parents, your siblings. And there's a phobia of people that overwhelms the victim of narcissistic abuse. Even after they are long gone and out of, hopefully, any narcissistic relationship, there's a phobia, there's a fear of people. And it's very difficult for a person that has been abused by a narcissist to trust someone. I deal with it all of the time as a pastor, and I have to be patient, and I have to be slow, and I have to be intentional, and I have to build the bridge of trust brick by brick by brick by brick. I can't get frustrated and say, well, oh, what's the problem? I'm not that person or this person. I have to understand that the fallout of narcissistic abuse lasts a lot longer than the relationship. The impact goes into the person's future many times. This is why Proverbs 18:19 says a brother offended is harder to be won than a strong city. Yeah. I write next that victims may develop a desire to end their lives. In other words, victims many times take on a spirit of suicide. How many times have I seen that? And this again makes me patient, careful, intentional in terms of dealing with people, because you never know when a person is really on the edge. And when you see people that have stood under the weight of narcissistic abuse, quite often you find that there are suicidal ideations. Sometimes there are suicide attempts in people. It's because these people, their souls have been drained. I talked to you earlier about how the narcissist is like a vampire, an emotional vampire that drains the life out of an individual. And many days, victims are left to feel like there's nothing to live for. This is what happened with Elijah, honestly. He prayed to die, after he had his run-in with Jezebel, and Jezebel threatened to kill him. When you read that story in the Bible, Elijah was really praying to die. He had become suicidal because of the impact of Jezebel's words. She sent messengers to just give him a message. And it impacted him so severely that, he prayed to God to die, and he ran for his life. He was that afraid. But these are keys to helping a person that's suffering from narcissistic abuse. I started not to read this, but I think I should read it, because I think, there are people that may not read the book that need to hear this. But here's some keys to helping a person that's suffering from narcissistic abuse that may want to die or kill him or herself. Number one, they don't need harsh judgment. They don't need that. Number one, they don't need you. I can't believe you sitting here and you thinking and you talking crazy like this. They don't need that. Number two, they need intentional conversation. You have to intentionally talk with them, get them to talking, and just gradually work your way deeper and deeper. Number three, they need intentional conversation and to be refocused on life. Never say snap out of it. They don't need judgment. They need conversation, and they need to be refocused on life. Because victims of narcissistic abuse are adhered, they are glued to, they are stuck at a negative point in the past with a person that was diabolical and toxic. They need you to not judge them. They need you to talk to them and to gradually refocus them on life and their future. Then I write, victims are imprisoned by comparisons. Narcissistic abuse victims spend their lives competing for acceptance and approval. So pretty much every social setting they're in, they are comparing themselves to others, and they're feeling like they're being measured next to others, because narcissists many times do what? They compare their victims to others to break the soul of their victims. Then I write, victims sometimes defend their abusers. I am very careful about getting in the middle of a relationship between, like boyfriends, girlfriends, spouses, parents, children, because you'll get in there, and if, once you start reprimanding the offender, many times the victim will attack you. And, you have to understand that this is par for the course. It happens quite frequently. There's a certain level that victims can get to where they're enmeshed, and they can't separate their identity from the victimizer. So when the punishment becomes so severe that they feel like the victimizer is going to actually pay a price for his or her behavior against them, many times they'll take the victimizer's side instead of being on the side of those who are coming to their rescue. So it is imperative that we all think about the spirit behind all of our relationships, lest we be victims unaware. Now, in our next one, we're going into chapter number 6, where we're talking about being married to a narcissist. My. Ooh, my goodness. Being married to a narcissist. And I will unpack that for you next time. Now, let me pray for you. Father God, I thank you for your presence. I thank you for the wisdom that you've given us. And now, Father, I ask you to bring healing to the hearts of those that are suffering from this, those that know people who are suffering from this. Bring healing to their hearts by the Holy Spirit, in Jesus' name. Now listen, there's a link in the description for BetterHelp Counseling. And if you go there, use that link, it'll afford you 10% off of the cost of counseling. And if you decide to use them, they'll make a deposit into RCBLAKESMINISTRIES for my referring them to you. Don't forget to go by my website, pick up all of my online programs. Soul Ties would be a great one to go along with this study. And of course, don't forget to pick up the book itself from Amazon. You can get it in the physical version, you can get it in the audio version, or the electronic version. Thanks to all of you who constantly sow into our lives. Lisa and I love you so much. Also, sign up for my mailing list. You can know exactly what's going on. You can even get reminders about when I'm going to be on and all of these kinds of things. And just know that we love you. Lisa and I love you. We thank God for you. All of the people here, all of the team here at RC Blakes Ministries, we love and appreciate you. You make it happen for us. You make it possible for us. So we thank God for you. Now, until next time, we're going into chapter 7, chapter 6, married to a narcissist is what we're going to be dealing with next time. But until then, you're on top and you're going higher. God has more in store for you. So guess what? We will see you at the top. God bless you. Until then.
We here at RC Blakes Ministries want to thank you for spending this time with us today. RC and Lisa are always honored to have you with us. Don't forget to reach out to us by visiting our website at www.rcblakes.com. While you're there, you may join our mailing list and receive a free download of The Laws of Manifesting Your Vision by R.C. Blakes. Also look at all of the online programs by R.C. You may find all books written by R.C. and Lisa. Once again, all of us here at R.C. Blakes Ministries want to thank you from the bottom of our hearts. And as we always say, see you at the top.